Washington and Carolina. Friday night, glad you've tuned in.
All right. Hi. Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Julie Souza. I almost didn't pronounce my own name correctly. That's amazing. Good start. And I lead global strategic development for sports here at AWS. We're not here at AWS, but at AWS. I am joined by Grant Nodine and David Lehanski from the NHL and Andrew Reich, also from AWS. And we are going to be talking about live cloud production and all the other innovative things we are doing together today. And to do that, I'm going to start with David, and you talking a little bit about sort of the spirit of innovation and how the league is thinking about that. And then we can dive into the journey we've been on for live cloud production. Cool?
Absolutely. I'll start by maybe at the risk of stating the obvious, explaining how we're looking at this shift that's been occurring for a while, but with regard to media and content distribution. Obviously, we were in a world of one-to-many with radio and linear TV, and then that changed drastically when we started streaming, and then social media came into play. And basically, the number of platforms that we can now distribute content to continues to expand at a rapid pace. And there's been a lot of discussion about that. I'm sure some of you have been paying attention to what's been happening at the local and RSN level in sports, and how that's impacting distribution and rights fees and everything attached to that. But the thing that maybe not everyone, I still don't think is covering enough, is that not only is the distribution changing the model, but the distribution is also changing the types of content that we can distribute. And if you think, in the early shift, we just basically took the traditional live game broadcast and started streaming it. And then we cut highlights from that and started pushing it out to social. So what you saw as a fan or a non-fan wasn't really that different. And now the technology that's in place is really allowing us to not only cater to the multitude of platforms that are out there with the delivery of content, but to actually create exclusive or custom content for those platforms. And that's what we're really trying to do with cloud production. There's, of course, a story tied to efficiencies, which we'll talk about, but the real big benefit for a sports league is tied to growth and the ability to now take a set of feeds, audio, visual data, and create multiple versions of a singular game broadcast. Different themes appealing to different audiences. And that's what we're really excited about. And that generates not only fan growth, but opportunities for monetization, and we can go on and on and on. But that's really what has gotten us so excited about this. And it really, we really came together and understood it's going to be a long-term roadmap, which started last year.
Yeah. So let's start with last year. You want to go?
Oh, I want to go, but I want to go and reset the clock to about 3 years ago. And say our journey really started when we started saying we've got to be able to orchestrate the cloud and software define the services that we're turning on and off on a per game basis. And so this orchestration layer has got to be schedule aware. It's got to be aware of all the different feeds that we're providing. It's got to be aware of all of these different things and aware of how to stitch the various parts of the cloud services together to produce, a better whole, right? And so whether that's eventually getting to the point where we're orchestrating a cloud broadcast, or it's literally just turning on feeds at the right time, connecting all of the potential endpoints so that I've entitled all my rights holders and I've given all my linear rights holders feeds from the cloud. And also, obviously, it's given me a tremendous opportunity. It's driving a tremendous opportunity to go and really be able to press a button and spin up alternate services associated with each broadcast, right? And so you can really customize how you cover each event in addition to how you're, how you're just getting feeds into the cloud. And so, when Andrew and I first started kind of working on it, like towards actually, getting this stuff going, and we built our orchestration layer, it really was a great head start for us, and the ability for us to hit the ground running with AWS on live cloud production was a function of the fact that we had already done the legwork to get all of the feeds into the cloud.
So that's the scheduling, and you want to talk about the scheduling and encoding work we did with NHL that got us up to March of last year.
Yeah. So I think what's key is by working with the NHL on the encoding and scheduling platform is it also allowed us together to learn about the distribution methods, the contribution methods, just get the video up to the cloud using, several feeds and coders in every venue around the NHL. Now that video is up running through the cloud, what else can we do? But you're learning so much about the different methods of distribution and working with different partners and clients that the league has to use all of these extra camera angles that are being run through AWS. So when we got to last March, a little bit before March, for the NHL Tech Showcase, thinking about what can we do, what can we show, so let's produce a game in the cloud. We know how to run all this video up, distribute it out. Let's add something onto it. Let's do more with the video that's being run through the cloud. So we produced a game, Kraken and Ducks. We had a technical director in Wisconsin. We had replay operators spread around Canada. We had a graphics op in Seattle. And that really, I think, showed all of us like, wow, we can do this. We have a distributed crew. The experience, the feed that was running in Climate Pledge Arena looked great. Didn't look really any different than the screens feed that was in Seattle. And I think from there, and kudos to Grant, Dave, Andre, and team to really lean in and say, all right, how can we keep improving this and iterate on it? And let's go to Australia and do a world feed production. Let's do more preseason games. Let's do a shadow production in December where we show another broadcast partner how we're doing this. And that's what led us to a few weeks ago where Sorry. Okay.
So I don't want to go too fast through this story because there were stages through this story, right? So we did the POC, we P'd the C, right? In Seattle last March. That led us to start thinking about now what's next? How do we up the game? And let's talk a little bit about Melbourne and the world feed and what that enabled, because it wasn't just the same thing. This was a multi-language distribution.
Yeah. So the difference we were taking a really componentized approach to this, right? Which is that, hey, we've got to, we're going to prove out that we can actually switch a live game in the cloud and we can match the latency or beat the latency of what we're seeing on-prem. And being able to really execute on that was, the feather in our cap that we needed, so to speak, to say, okay, we're going to move on to the next kind of challenge, which is, hey, well, how do we use the cloud to supercharge our distribution and to enable us to distribute, let's say the same feed to 7 different regions with, on the fly translated graphics, so that we're able to actually have a single operator with a couple of touch screens sit there and drive 5 broadcasts that are hitting 5 different regions with different languages and different video. And to be able to execute on that really was the next step for us. And then it's the next step now, obviously, I don't want to jump too far, so I won't jump too far.
No.
I'll let Julie.
No, it's fine. But I think I want to double click on that a little bit, because what's important about that is that you're taking one asset and you're making it work for multiple audiences. And in this case, it's a language and globalization play, but that would have been harder to do terrestrially, right? So that was an enabling thing that said, okay, now we can do this and we can make our content more relevant in more markets because we have this capability.
Yeah, I would argue that, the finance of spitting out 5 different versions of every broadcast terrestrially is crazy.
It's cost prohibitive, right?
Cost prohibitive.
Right. All right.
Why it doesn't happen.
Right. I mean, and this is why we were so excited about the fact that we can now actually go and really customize our game for the audience.
So now, all right, I know where you guys want to go. We're going to go to March 22nd now. We're going to talk about that because I also want to talk about what that enabled. And this gets back to where you started, Dave, with some of this alternate broadcast stuff too. But on March 22nd, the NHL became the first professional league in North America to produce a game and send it to air entirely in the cloud. And I think that is awesome. And if that game had been produced terrestrially, it would have emitted 2.05 metric tons of carbon dioxide. To sequester or counter that sort of emission, you would have to plant 34 trees and let them grow for 10 years. At scale, live cloud production can have a meaningful environmental impact. I love that. I love it so much.
Me too.
I will. But not only that, it lets us do other cool things like an alternate broadcast. So let's talk about March 22nd. Let's talk about that game that was happening in Washington. Where were all of you during that game? You were not in Washington. And then I want to talk about the alternate broadcast. So David, I want you to speak to that too. Okay. So have at it, boys.
Andrew and I were in the New York office, and we produced an alternate broadcast that Dave will kind of fill you in on. But generally speaking, we had a couple of one person in Secaucus kind of looking over or 2 people in Secaucus looking over the shoulder of the people that were in the same room producing a cloud broadcast, which really was just down to familiarity for those folks than it was a necessity. They could have been out in their parking lot for all intents and purposes. But yeah, I mean, it was amazing to see that come off and not be on site and sweating behind the scenes. Right. And so that was just a great, welcome and like a little bit of a reward for all the hard work we had put in.
Yeah, the game emanated from Washington, D.C., right? So it was a Capitals home game. And there were 2 productions, right? There was an end-to-end traditional version of the broadcast, looked like any game you might see from a national media partner. And then there was we called it NHL Edge Unlocked Allcast. So NHL Edge is the name of our overall data capture system for the NHL, which is really centered around a real-time puck and player tracking system. There's a sensor in every jersey. There's a sensor in the puck. We're capturing, more than a dozen times a second, with regard to the location of the players in the puck. And we've been turning it into an incredible amount of new statistics, new analytics, things that people have never seen before. Some obvious things like, real-time graphical integrations of, how many miles per hour players skating as they're skating, featured above them, and some more very complex metrics like face-off probability, which is calculating the likelihood of any one player winning the face-off as they're literally about to take the face-off. There's so much of this for hockey, and it's so new. We've been really wanting to push with regard to how we could integrate it into a live game broadcast. And as an alternate cast for this event, we were able to do that and really get sort of an L-bar graphical overlay on the live game that was populating real-time stats and analytics correlating to the game and what our 2 edge announcers were talking about as the game was going on. And I think it was,
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and Dave may get more feedback on this than I do, but generally speaking, the feedback from like anybody that saw it or experienced was like, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, we don't have much time. We're in the last week of the regular season, but we're talking about doing this potentially in the playoffs with one of our partners because they saw it and they just, once you see it, you get it. Like, this is a really incredible experience. And I think, look, the means for measuring these things needs to change as well, right? If you're living in a world where you have one major broadcast and all of your media and marketing is driving people to watch that, and now you're going to go to a world where you might have 5 broadcasts and you're slicing it up to say, this audience, you go watch this one. You might like this one better. we need to be a little bit smarter about how we're measuring these games and looking at an overall consumption profile and then discrete individual profiles for different audiences. But that capability didn't exist, a year ago, and now here we are today, where we're going to really cater to our avid fans with potentially a broadcast that looks like nothing anyone's ever seen for hockey before.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say another really cool dynamic about this was the main broadcast that we did, the production control room that was all cloud-based. We didn't get in there until March 1st, March 2nd. Typically, it takes months up to a year to commission a control room or a production truck. And we, had worked with the folks at NHL Network to set up some tables, monitors, everything else was cloud-based. So the fact that we got in there and 3 weeks later we were broadcasting a game and producing a game and allowing the operators to have that same experience that they normally would if they did a normal production or a Remy style production, I think that really speaks to, the value of this. And to Dave's point about, NHL Edge Unlocked, what was really cool there was a week or two before we said, hey, we have these feeds running through AWS. Yeah, let's have your studios team produce another show off of this. And that's where, bringing it full circle, the distribution and contribution that we did in 2021 to really understand, how Media Connect and all these different services work, of just pulling in feeds and adding some flavor on top. That's where it really comes full circle to, let's produce another broadcast, another show off of what we're doing in Secaucus. Let's add another layer to it.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to what Dave said and say that, we have to find a new way to measure this, because the viewership is fractured itself along viewing habits and age and generational kind of, sensibilities, and said, well, we've got to be there too, right? We've got to be in the same place where the viewership is, and we've got to be giving them what they want.
So interesting. You said we've got these avid fans, and we could super serve them with an analytics sort of broadcast, right? On the flip side, you can bring new people into the sport. So talk a little bit about Big City Greens, talk about what happened today with Multiverse. That's a way of getting new audiences, and you have that flexibility now to do that in a way that you never would have been economical or feasible before.
Absolutely. So today there was a broadcast of a live game between the Colorado Avalanche and the Vegas Golden Knights. It happened this afternoon on with our friends at TNT Sports. It aired on True. It aired on HBO Max, and basically it's a cartoon. It's an animated hockey game, and we did the first one ever in North American sports last season. Maybe all globally, but I'm positive it's the first one ever. Yeah, in the world. Okay. But we're basically taking the positional data of the puck, of the players. We're rendering that in a three-dimensional world, and then we're wrapping animation around all of that. So what you see is the actual live game. The little avatars are moving exactly the way the NHL players are on the ice in near real time. But obviously we're producing it in an environment and in a manner that should be, and has proven to be, far more engaging to kids, to young fans, to families. And so when you think about when we said earlier, like all of these new platforms, it's happening rapidly. I mean, this is something obviously no one was really even contemplating just a short time ago. And now it's something we're thinking of investing in on an ongoing basis for next season. So from a production standpoint, again, if your assets are all centralized, and, these guys will tell you what that means and what you need to have in place, but we're not just talking about streaming. We're talking about metaverse experiences. We're talking about putting live highlights into Roblox. We have a game in Roblox called NHL Blast, and we now have the ability to put three-dimensional highlights into that game so fans can walk their avatar right up to the rink and see the games happening live, or watch the highlights happening live.
And soon immersive.
We're working on that too. So it is a completely different world. But again, this journey, it's not just about distribution. It's about the experience. It's about how you can do exactly what Julie said, like cater to the needs and interests of all of these audiences, because they're not consuming the same way. It's clear to us now. Thankfully, we have some research to model off of to figure out what we need to create to reach them in the best manner possible. But It's incredible. And eventually we'll get to a point where the other layer to add will be you'll choose the experience you want. You know, there'll be an application where you can choose the camera feed. Is it live game footage? Is it animated footage? Do we follow a singular player with an ISO cam? Are there graphical overlays? You look at statistics. Am I social networking with my friends? Am I turning on free to play gaming? Am I betting? I mean, all of this will be at your fingertips. But to stitch that all into one application and let thousands of people operate that at the same time is still a little bit of ways away. We've got some more work to do. But right now, the opportunity is customizing the content for audiences, and that's what AWS has allowed us to do.
I think an interesting anecdote, the first year you guys, and you've done 2 big City Greens implementations. The first one, you guys found that it really resonated with tween girls, right? Not who you were necessarily fishing for on that, but how awesome that a creative display of an NHL game brought in a new audience, right? And so.
Absolutely. And a big one at that. You know, it wasn't like a small number. It was a significant number. And we flipped the demographic profile. A normal NHL game, 60-40 male to female. This was more than that. It was like 65-35 female to male.
Awesome. It's like your own version of Taylor Swift, right?
We got to get her into one of those games. That's next.
Exactly.
Good idea.
There we go. So what's next?
Oh, that's always my favorite question.
No.
I mean, to me, I think exploring all the knock-on effects of building this infrastructure and being able to do this, how does it affect our highlights operation going forward? How does it affect, you know, kind of the on-prem broadcasts ongoing, right? So there's just a tremendous amount of possibilities, and really, you know, I've said a couple of times that, you know, I think the question very soon is going to flip to, how am I not in the cloud? You know, like I am paying a cost for not having built the infrastructure to push my feeds into the cloud because I am not able to innovate like my competitors.
I love that. I want to let everybody else have a last comment on this, but I also do want to see if anybody in the audience has any questions. So we'll leave a few minutes there. Andrew.
No, I think, and Dave hit it before when he was talking about kind of the centralized assets in the cloud. I think, you know, NHL has done an analytic, you know, done a pilot for an analytics feed main broadcast. You know, we've seen some of your broadcast partners do highlight-driven shows. You've done cartoons. So I think with all the assets being centralized, to Dave's point, we could see them do, here's 4 versions, take your pick. And I think by having all the assets centralized and it's all there, you know, it kind of breaks the model in a good way that you're not, and Grant brings this up all the time, sometimes in a production truck or a control room, you're limited based on the feeds that you have accessible. With the cloud, you have everything because it's the cloud. You can access your archive. You can access the other feeds from other venues. You can access data feeds and analytics feeds. You have more at your disposal. So I think, you know, it'll be fun to see you all, you know, give more options for fans of different styles of production and, you know, ways of consuming content.
And there's a roadmap to get there, and we're on it together. And I think what's next is just continuing to show more. But maybe creating, taking another singular game, but show how with that one game we can create many, many versions that read many, many people, local, national, global, international, different versions, different graphics, different stats. I mean, all across the board, different sets of sponsors, and really prove out to everyone in a live capacity. This is happening in a singular moment from a centralized repository and production center where we're catering to a multitude of audiences in a way that's growing the game and also creating opportunities for monetization with multiple media partners. So when you take a step back and you look at the sort of the spider web all around this singular game, it's sort of grown in orders of magnitude from where we are today. And that's the type of growth we're talking about, that's going to benefit everyone, at the league. And, you know, I think it also sets us up well to start, which we already have, talking about generative AI and what role does that play. And to Grant's point, If you're not in the cloud, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage when we really start to understand the benefits of this and how you could directly apply it. But I think that's coming next as well to some degree.
Love it. Any questions from the audience? All right.
It's a real quick one, and I might be the only Australian in the room, but why choose Melbourne for the World Feed example?
Why did they choose Melbourne?
Well, I mean, I guess we had an opportunity. It was the first NHL game in the Southern Hemisphere. And really we said, hey, this is a great opportunity to say, hey, if we want to produce a broadcast that really embraces, let's say, that part of the world, in a unique way, Melbourne is the place to do it.
We have a broader international strategy for growing the game. A lot of the data and research, let's just say, would suggest that Australians might be prone to becoming NHL fans more than some areas or countries in the world. So that's why we focused on doing it there. And then once we decided to do it there, it aligned with the roadmap that we were on to say, hey, we've been thinking about this like international multi-feed language thing. So let's focus. Yeah.
I'll try and cover this. Real quick. Has there been any pushback from the athletes themselves when there's a cartoon representation of their play? And their big focus is on brand and personalization, right? They've got sponsorship deals and ad deals, and now people aren't seeing them play. They're seeing Rex, or they're seeing other characters going around. And how's that been? Or are they embracing it?
So they're absolutely embracing it because they recognize that the project overall is so good for the league, right? And we did do a game this year. It was our first game that was just a hockey game. There's no third-party IP. We didn't leverage DC Comics like we did today, or Big City Greens like we did with ESPN, because we think longer term, from a scalability standpoint, that's probably more of what we're going to focus on locally in market. So local fans will see an animated hockey game that's all NHL. But we'll come in and out throughout the season with these bigger games that leverage third-party IP because they give us more promotion, more popularity, more awareness if Superman, Bugs Bunny, and Batman are playing in an NHL game. And so the players completely understand. I think we're strategic about the players that we pick in each game. We try and move it around. But ultimately it's, good for the game and they get it. There's revenue sharing and everything. There's a collective bargaining agreement in place. We're 50-50 across the board. So every dollar comes in, they get half of.
As a comics fan, I just want to say, no way anybody would be able to beat Superman.
Well, the puck was made of kryptonite for the second period. So.
There you go.
Well, my comment is what Grant had referred to is having access to the archive. And last night we watched UFC's 300. And some of the great, from a fan's perspective, some of the great content is being able to see that archive footage. Right? Footage that we haven't seen before in the history of their sports enterprise, and to be able to pull that into the NHL is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah. 100%. That's absolutely one of, I would say, the knock-on effects of this, right? Is that we have a content, an archive portal in the cloud, and it's growing rapidly, and really being able to go and leverage that in a broadcast in a moment's notice is something that you couldn't do in a broadcast truck. You didn't have enough connectivity to do it, and pulling down large files was just not an option. Nor did you have EVS channels to play it out on, right? So, what I would say is that this really supercharges what is possible. Most trucks cannot have a broadcast feed of every other game that's going on around the league that night without paying a lot of money in occasional fiber transmission, right? Most trucks are stuck with a 6-channel EBS that has, 4 channels to play out and 2 channels to play out and 4 channels to record. What if I can quadruple that in the cloud? So that should have a knock-on effect of, hey, all of my replays in game are a lot better, but my highlights should be supercharged because now I've definitely got the right angle for whatever the play is. There's just so many different effects down the line. And then also being able to say and take replays out of that system immediately and push them into the archive so that immediately after the game, all of a sudden, you're not waiting for the next day to call us and say, hey, can you give me melt footage of that play last night because it was awesome. I can download it immediately and have it in my program in 10 minutes.
Right. And the beauty of sports is it is spontaneous, new things, records are broken nightly, daily, and sometimes you can only do so much planning for that. And 5 to 10 years ago, if somebody broke a record that was unexpected, you're in a production truck, you're yelling back to the content library, and the overnight person's having to convert a tape to, send it back to the production truck. And I know this firsthand because that was me getting yelled at by producers, where now everything's in the cloud. Grant can grab that quickly, give it to a technical director, and put it on air. And you just have so much more at your disposal to create a more enhanced and sophisticated show.
The four of us could talk for hours about this, but I'm getting shown the hook. So I would like to thank all of you. I want to thank David Lehanski, Andrew Reich, Grant Nodine. Have a great show, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.